Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a completely neutral clinical look at what actually keeps systems from falling apart. We're going to be breaking down an institutional constraint model from political science. But spoiler alert, this applies to almost any complex system you interact with daily. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're treating massive systems, like democracies, as clinical mechanical structures. We'll expose the illusion of self-enforcement, map out the critical difference between formal rules and informal norms, see what happens when actors push those rules right to the edge, dissect a full system collapse, apply this everywhere, and finally, look at how to defend the equilibrium. Section 1. The illusion of self-enforcement. When we look at a mature democracy, right, even a massive corporation, we usually just assume the machine runs on autopilot, right? But the source material corrects this starkly. Democracy is not a self-driving car. Its survival relies entirely on constrained behavior. It doesn't survive just because leaders have inherent goodwill. No, it survives because guardrails exist. Without them, the machine doesn't drive itself. It drives right off a cliff. Section 2, formal rules versus informal norms. Now, what's really fascinating about this breakdown is how it completely splits the system right down the middle. We've got two distinct layers operating simultaneously. On one side, you have the hard layer, formal institutions, written laws, constitutions, courts. But on the other side, you have the soft layer, informal norms. These are the unwritten rules, like mutual toleration and simple everyday restraint. It's absolutely crucial to understand the difference here between what you are legally allowed to do and what you voluntarily choose not to do for the sake of the system. And that introduces the dual constraint model. A system is only genuinely stable when both the formal rules and the informal norms are reinforcing each other at the exact same time. Here is the big takeaway. Laws alone won't save you. If that informal layer of mutual restraint collapses, those hard laws suddenly become highly exploitable weapons. The rules might still be on the books, but the game itself is fundamentally broken. Section 3, pushing rules to the edge. So, to really grasp why that soft layer of norms is constantly under threat, we have to look at human nature. Power naturally seeks an advantage. The sources refer to this as rule edge exploitation. Honestly, the greatest danger to a system usually doesn't come from blatantly breaking the rules. That's too obvious. It comes from actors pushing the rules to their absolute interpretive limits, staying technically, legally compliant while totally, completely violating the spirit of the game. Just think about the incentive structure here. Political actors naturally want to maximize their power. That's a given. If enforcement mechanisms like the courts or the media are weak, the temptation to stretch those rules is just massive. And if an unwritten norm is a bit vague, well, there's a huge tactical advantage to just ignoring it entirely. It's like a giant loophole just waiting to be jumped through. Section 4. The norm drift collapse. Now let's see how this builds into an inevitable structural breakdown. When actors start ignoring those soft guardrails, we enter this terrifying feedback loop. It always starts with step 1, a small norm violation. If that's met with step 2, weak punishment, we immediately hit step 3, normalization. The previously unthinkable is now just standard operating procedure. This recalibrates what's acceptable, which triggers step 4, larger, bolder violations, escalating until we hit step 5, the total, utter collapse of informal restraint. You might be wondering, why does it escalate so predictably? It comes down to reciprocity bias. Informal norms are essentially self-reinforcing expectations. Basically, people restrain themselves because they trust their opponents are going to do the exact same thing when the roles reverse. They behave moderately because they fear future retaliation. But the second that mutual trust fractures, the incentive to hold back completely vanishes. And this right here is the ultimate failure condition. Systemic failure happens the exact moment rival factions stop viewing each other as legitimate competitors and start treating each other as illegitimate threats. When legitimacy dies, retaliation cycles completely replace restraint cycles, and the entire system fractures. Section 5. Universal System Principles. Okay, let's zoom out for a second. While this model was originally built analyzing political democracies, these exact same dynamics govern completely non-political domains. Check this out. In financial trading, if participants ignore implicit market norms, volatility completely spikes. In chess, reckless over-aggression destroys your positional equilibrium. You can't just flip the board. In cybersecurity, insider misuse breaks guardrails way faster than external hackers ever could. And in military deterrence, breaking mutual restraint assumptions immediately triggers a dangerous escalation spiral. The underlying math is literally identical everywhere.
But seeing how incredibly fragile this is across all these different domains begs a really serious question. Do these constraint systems rely a bit too much on the inherent goodwill of the participants? Let's take a quick narrative breath here and look at a ruthless structural critique of the original model.
Modern critiques argue that, yeah, the original model is kind of idealized. It assumes a shared commitment to the system is going to persist even under extreme polarization. Most importantly, it treats norms as purely cultural. But in reality, norms depend heavily on the underlying power equilibrium. If the power asymmetry between factions gets too large, those norms are going to collapse regardless of anyone's goodwill. Guardrails aren't just polite, gentlemanly agreements. They are effectively enforced equilibria between competing power centers.
Section 6. Defending systemic equilibrium. So, knowing exactly how systems are built and knowing how power imbalances break them, how do we actually defend the equilibrium? Whether you are designing an AI alignment protocol or managing a chaotic corporate boardroom, the defense logic is exactly the same. You must deliberately reinforce informal norms. First, maintain mutual legitimacy between rivals. Second, enforce forbearance. That means practicing restraint even when taking a short-term legal advantage is super tempting. Third, aggressively protect institutional neutrality. And fourth, consciously, actively resist normalizing that aggressive rule-edge exploitation. This brings us to our master thesis. Formal rules only work when they are supported by informal restraint. Without both, systems become legally correct but structurally unstable. So I want to leave you with this thought. Look closely at your workplace, your digital platforms, or even your local community. Where are you relying on a system right now that is perfectly legally correct, but is already dangerously unstable because the informal restraint has completely vanished? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the structures around you.